All right, so there it is. Our door is finished. Hello everyone, thank you for joining us again in WEGS Garage. Today we're going to be working on finishing up the door assemblies on our 1964 Triumph TR4. That means we're going to be installing the interior door latch mechanism, finishing up all the loose ends inside the door, and then finally getting the door card put into place to kind of wrap up and finish off the interior. There's a lot to get done, so stick around. Okay, so before we get too carried away putting our door card on, since we won't have access to anything back here, we really need to make sure everything inside the door is sorted before we go too much further. And the first kind of issue we run into is this is the door pull handle here. Can't get that to focus for some reason. And that goes right in. There are two holes right here. And it bolts through the door card and into these square holes right here. And originally there is a cage nut here, and we have like two of those cage nuts. But unfortunately our other two seem to be lost to time. So we're improvising a little bit because we weren't able to find cage nuts that were quite the right size. And so instead we've kind of fashioned a riv nut. I believe it's an 832 thread, and we use a riv nut and then a washer, and it fits in the square hole tightly enough so the front side's held, and then on the back side we just put the washer in as a little bit of a backup to make sure it never can pull out. Works pretty slick.
If you don't have fat fingers.
Okay, so our next step is getting our inner door actuator assemblies installed. They go on the inside of the door in that location there. Then there is a rod that comes back to the actual door latch mechanism. In between there's a little piece of felt that goes in that little channel right there. You got 3 screws there, and that is it. These are the original remote door actuators here. They're in pretty good condition. They seem to work fairly well. One thing that is apparent is that this one was on the driver's side, and you can see there's quite a bit more wear on that one, especially on this little pin right here that slides up and down. And so they're actually the exact same between both sides of the car. So what we're gonna do, since this one spent the first 50 years of its life on the driver's side, we're going to move that over to the passenger side and use this one, which has very little wear on the driver's side, and hopefully kind of even that out. And obviously the driver's door gets a lot more action than the passenger's door, so hopefully that'll keep her rolling for another 50 years. Okay, this door mechanism is installed. You can see we got our felt piece behind here. We just glued that in place. That's just some floor jute, and that just keeps it from rattling against this piece of metal here. Up front there's just 3 screws that go into the mechanism there, and then the rod comes back, and at the rear there is a couple of washers that go through a pin on the door latch mechanism, and then there's a little bit of a circlip sort of thing on there that holds the whole works in place. That's a little tricky to get in place because this is not a lot of room to work there. There's finger for scale. But everything seems to be working quite well. You can open and close the door pretty easily. Obviously, this is a window winder. Don't worry about that. Okay, so we've got everything wrapped up inside the door. We've double checked all these bolts to make sure everything's tight and the door mechanism works and everything shuts and lines up well, because we're not going to have any access inside there anymore. What we're going to do now to protect the door card from water getting in here, we're just going to cover the inside of this panel with plastic. We got some poly film right there, and then some window kit tape. So this is like a double-sided tape that you use to put plastic over the windows of your house in the wintertime to keep the drafts down. A little different from some double-sided tape in that it's not quite as hard to remove if it ever has to come off, which seems like a good idea here. So we're just gonna put that tape around the edges here and maybe a few pieces in the middle to hold it in place. And then we're gonna slap the plastic on there and trim it out to the sides of the door so it'll all be hidden behind the door panel eventually. Got the door panel here, so this is a bit of a tricky operation from here on out. There's a lot of little holes for different things. You have the door handle, the door latch, and the window winder mechanisms. Then there's 2 screws that go through the edges of the map pocket and into the door. All those have spots, kind of approximate locations on the back of the panel. Then in order to put everything together, you kind of need to have all the clips in place. You got to get the springs for the winder and the door handle in there, and you got to get everything lined up just right in order to get it into position. So to start, we located the winder mechanism and the door handle, and we just pushed it up against the door over there and just made a little mark. And now we got to cut a hole in here to allow the shafts of those devices to come out of the door panel. For the 2 screws for the door pull, we took a couple of spare 832 screws and just cut the heads off and kind of ground the end to a real rough point in each spot, and then we just put the door panel on there and kind of felt around and made a couple marks for the screw holes there. It does line up with the holes on the back here, but it just kind of makes it a little bit more of a precise location rather than just relying on those holes. Okay, so we put all the screws in to kind of just make sure everything lined up here. So we have the handle in place. We did get the map pocket screws in. Luckily, the holes in the door frame lined up with the holes in the template on the back, or the wooden piece on the back of the panel. Otherwise, I'm not sure how we would have ever got that, but those lined up pretty good. We've got all these through. Everything's good to go. So now we got to get our little clips on the back side, and then the other thing that goes in there are some little springs for the door handle and the window winder that kind of like hold the door panel out away up against the handle. So we got to get those in, and then we got to snap the whole thing into place. And I guess that's it. We'll see. rather annoyingly, I think because of how these panels are made, there's a little extra thickness of material here on the edges. Like this piped edge is actually 2 thicknesses folded over and stapled on, versus the original is just like a one-piece kind of thing. I don't know what the problem is, but these little clips, they don't really fit unless you actually trim out a little circle right here, or a little notch for it to fit into. So that's what we've done here. It doesn't seem to have affected the integrity of the assembly in any way, so should be all right. Not really sure how to hold these springs in the right position, so we're gonna try just taping them to the back of the door panel, just to hold them there while we put it on. Alright, so there it is. Our door is finished. That actually did not go that bad. The snaps are not that hard to line up, and they do pull off again if you need to like adjust a few things. We did have to kind of play with them to get them to line up with the holes, but everything looks just awesome. The door opening mechanism, handle, and the window winder are a little tricky to get on. You really got to push this black surround back really hard against that spring and then get a pin in there to hold it in place. But once it's in, it looks really nice, looks really sharp, all finished off like that. Super happy with how that turned out. All right, that's gonna do it for today. Didn't quite get around to the driver's door, but we learned a lot doing our passenger's door, so hopefully the next one will be a snap, although kind of hate to jinx myself on that one. But thanks so much for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time.